Yeah, been here for a couple days now. Slept pretty much all of yesterday. Um, ate some salmon. It's pretty dang good. Uh, yeah, gonna try and mix a multi-video setup today with this, just to see how it goes. Got lots of different places to look. I don't know. Just trying to have some fun with this. Really struggling with taking a back seat or slowing down or kind of trying to reduce some of the pressure. Um, went for a swim in the ocean today. I almost have some guilt at the moment about feeling good walking on the beach. It's busy, everybody's happy. Say good morning to a few people. Um, and just even the scowls and the negativity and stuff, it just doesn't it doesn't feel as bad as it does somewhere else. And I'm trying to put all of that into perspective, uh, even the salmon thing. It was funny because I sent a picture of it, and then I realized it was just like chunks of salmon in a plastic container that I was keeping in the fridge. Like, there's nothing appetizing about that. You can't necessarily convey the quality of a food in a picture. And and so sending to somebody, oh, look how amazing this plain fish is, uh, when it looks very plain, um, is not really like a selling feature. And there's nothing really to sell. And it did make me think about the fact that uh, I also made enough money back where I lived to afford to import fresh salmon and pay 10 times what it costs here for salmon, or whatever. And it's, I think the argument about affordability is losing some of its weight, because it was still affordable to me in that place, just like it is here. And so I had the luxury of a very good life that I left. Um, and it's a luxury that I have to be here, to be able to walk away from my life without consequence. I mean, there is consequence, I'm sure, but it's not something that everyone gets to have. And so to treat it like this is somehow more attainable or more reasonable or less of a luxury than the luxury that I already had is probably not a realistic view. And so I do think that more of this comes down to not whether this is more or less luxury, and not focusing on like, oh, look at chicken is only $2 here instead of $12 or whatever it is. It's more about this fits more with peace in my head. And so is that because I don't have a job and I don't have any consequences and I can do whatever I want? Um, and that's what's driving this, or is it healthy living and less bombardment of social media and more connection to just being calm and um sitting on the beach and walking along the beach and going in the ocean and living healthier? Like, I think that those things are not that accessible um where I was, and I do think that that's what matters, and I did try to focus on that when I was back, and I found it to be a massive struggle, that I was like forcing forcing myself to a detrimental point to get there. And so I don't know. I don't know what is good versus bad in that regard, and I don't know what necessarily is attainable or functional in that scenario for me, or if I'm always going to run into the same problem, just because it's such a struggle for me to stay healthy, and I don't know how to reframe that to not being this fight, to not drinking, to not doing drugs, to not gambling, to not spending excessive amounts of money, to trying to stay more connected to people, trying to be like, it feels like such a fight just to be healthy there, versus I feel like I have to go out of my way to be unhealthy here. Um and I don't have connection here, and I don't have um family, and I don't have much of a life outside of that. And so I don't know how sustainable any of this is, and I'm not trying to be unrealistic about that. Um but I I do feel better here, and like, even it's still like Chinese New Year, um and so everything's still closed. I had like a really poor workout yesterday. I ate tons of cookies and junk the first couple days, um but even then I still feel better, my legs better. um I'm working through some of the stuff that is a struggle for me mentally still. Yeah, I miss everybody. I wish that I had used the time that I was home differently. I still feel a mountain of things that need to be done here, and I think that that's I slept the entire day yesterday, and I could blame that on jet lag, but I feel like a lot more of that is depression and overwhelm and sadness than it is uh, jet lag. Um, but I yeah, I I don't know. I feel like I need to figure something out here, and or something more in line with this. I did notice that when I got back here, just knowing that this was here and that this was safe, like the second that I realized nothing had been stolen and there was no problems to deal with and nobody was trying to like kick me out early or take, like, I did realize that like just the safety of having this here and this being home would have been enough to tolerate what I was dealing with back there. And the fact that I didn't have that was like another added pressure that I probably should have dealt with before I left, because it would have made it easier to stay a bit longer, and that probably would have put me in a different position, because if I had have stayed another 3 weeks to work, I would have been in a very, very different spot, and would have maybe resolved some of the pressure too. And granted, I like, this is all hindsight stuff that's very easy to point out, where like I was very much in the mindset of like 2 months is all I can handle and blah blah blah. But knowing what I know now definitely would change some of how I approach that. And this is already something, like a year ago I wanted to move to Mexico to do kind of month on month off, or like 2 weeks on 2 weeks off was like all I was going to be able to manage. But I already knew that I needed that a year ago. And so for me to go back to work means that it has to be something where I'm coming back to this, as opposed to whatever's in Canada for me. And I don't feel like that is a like a Canada problem anymore. I think that is a me problem, and that's a me problem that isn't going away. Yeah, there's just too much there that doesn't work for me anymore. Yeah. Other than that, I still have a lot to figure out. I think, as always, billing and bank accounts and things like that are a disaster, kind of dealing with them across the country and across the world. Yeah. Outside of that, I really want to slow down and try and do it right this time. I don't know that I've fully wrapped my head around all the mistakes that I made, and I am definitely still recovering from some of the emotional stuff that I've dealt with, and losing a few things that I didn't think that I would lose. And trying to build a routine. I think 8 hours a day of learning and building are a couple big things to focus on. So, yeah. I would imagine there'll be a lot of emotional back and forth for the next couple weeks. So hopefully I can keep it together because this is a short month and I don't have a lot of time. So, I made a logo and a name, so I'm going to try and put that in too for this. Instead of Scott versus the world, it's everybody else knows I'm wrong. I thought it was funny because the acronym is EQ, and it's just amusing to me. Anyways, I think it's funny. It's layered. It's layered. Anyways, we'll see how I splice this together. All right.